The second phase of the COP15 meeting was just convened in Montreal, Canada, after the first phase took place in China's Yunnan province last October. Representatives from across the world are now gathering in Canada, discussing and finalizing measures to stop the ongoing loss of terrestrial and marine biodiversity, while also finding out a path to a sustainable relationship with nature. And we talked to Elizabeth Marama. She's the executive secretary of the UN Convention on Biological Diversity, and she shared her expectations to the meeting. Let me start by asking you, what are your expectations to the meetings this time?
Thank you very much first for having me, and good question. First, the main goal of this COP15 is to emerge with a roadmap for repairing our relationship with nature. So the 196 parties to the convention will have that responsibility to agree on and adopt an new international policy framework on biodiversity, or what we call currently post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. The framework which will form the basis of transformation of our relationship with nature. Basically, then, the ultimate goal is to reverse nature loss, biodiversity loss, and halt that by 2030, and regenerating biodiversity to ensure the sustainable use to 2050.
China right now is the president of the COP15 meeting. We know that China is also one of the countries with most abundant species. How do you comment on China's work to biodiverse conservation or even to ecological conservation at large?
As you may know, the COP15 theme is Ecological Civilization, building a shared future for all on Earth. And China, as the president of the COP15, has actually been displaying its commitment to this theme, as well as leadership on biological conservation. We know China continues to enhance public participation. It continues to boost international cooperation and exchange on biodiversity issues with regards to the establishment of protected area systems, with national parks being the main component. About 11,800 protected areas in China account for more than 18% of China's landmass. So this area, actually protected area coverage, exceeds the target set by the Aichi biodiversity target, which was 17%. And globally, we did not even reach by 2020 that 17%. But you can see China at national level exceeded at national level even that global target. And I'm sure we'll all be looking forward, because we know during the conference of the parties here, China will have a whole China pavilion to demonstrate some of these best practices, these achievements, where the rest of the world can learn and adapt and use.
And now let's talk about the lessons that we could possibly learn from our previous experiences. The 20 Aichi targets, they were set more than a decade ago, yet the international community actually has never fully to achieve any of the targets out of the 20. So what kind of experiences could the world learn from this, and in which areas can countries from across the world can really strengthen cooperation upon?
Indeed, you are correct. The last Aichi biodiversity target globally, none of them was achieved. However, at national level, as I've indicated, particularly, for instance, with the experience of China, progress was made in some targets. And even for some countries like China on protected areas surpassed the global target. The problem and the lesson learned from that is that for many countries, the national targets were not aligned with the global targets. And when the global picture was assessed, it was assessed at global level and not a national level. Much as we are talking, it was the Aichi targets were to be implemented over a decade. In actual fact, practically, the implementation was less than a decade. The process, which is a national consultative process and takes time, And this time, of course, learning from that, we expect implementation to begin immediately once the framework is adopted. Two, when the IT targets were adopted, not all key stakeholders were engaged in the development and implementation of those targets. So this time, the framework development process has engaged all stakeholders. So indigenous peoples, local communities, women, youth, business, financial institutions, corporate bodies, all have been engaged. The other lesson learned and built, the previous Aichi targets lacked many of the numerical value upon which to be used to measure progress during the decade. This time, all targets will have numerical values. The other was with regards to financial means of implementation. So this time, the framework will be accompanied with the means of implementation, which means it will be accompanied with a whole separate global action plan for capacity building, technology transfer, gender plan of action, also financial resource mobilization strategy will be part of the package.
Now let's talk about developing countries. I know in the Kunming Declaration, we talked about how to increasing financial support to all those developing countries. But is monetary assistance alone enough? If not, what kind of other help can we give to those developing countries?
We also need them to support for their policy and regulatory development that improve the protection of nature. For instance, regulating industrial activities, access to natural areas, use and extraction of natural resources. We need, of course, they need support in energy transition to be able to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and build adaptation and resilience through investments of ecosystem-based approaches. And this needs to be done in conjunction with supporting sustainable, equitable, inclusive social and economic development, taking into account the needs of the society, the needs of the people, because this then will ensure effective enforcement of those biodiversity laws to be put in place. They need technical and scientific cooperation, including through joint training or exchange of expertise, or joint research programs, or joint ventures for the development of relevant technologies and innovative solutions. They need to be supported with regards to access and transfer of technologies and be able to share that relevant data, information, and knowledge.